Welcome to the Less Stressed Life podcast. This is your host, Krista Bigler, private practice integrative nutritionist, helping people across the U.S. reverse digestive issues, eczema, and autoimmunity via phone and video consult. To learn more, visit lessstressednutrition.com. Now, on to the show. Today on the Less Stressed Life, we have a really fun guy, and that is a total pun. We have Jeff Chilton, who was raised in the Pacific Northwest, but he's just a total mushroom head, basically. So he studied ethnomycology at the University of Washington in the late 60s. I mean, we're going to get some history. Actually, let me just tell you something fun about Jeff. So Jeff lives outside of he's British Columbia. He lives on Vancouver Island, and then he winters in Argentina for trout fishing. I mean, don't you love him already? But he's basically he's an incredible mushroom expert, basically. So he's worked all over in mushrooms. Basically in the it started in the 60s. In the 70s, he did a bunch of mushroom conferences, which was probably way ahead of his time, honestly. And then he had a book about mushrooms in the 80s. And then he traveled a lot to China, looking at the supplement industry in the 90s, did a bunch of conferences. So it's pretty awesome. And through all this experience, he really culminated it to create his company, Namex. I hope I am saying it right, which was really the first to offer a complete line of certified organic mushroom extracts to the nutrition supplement industry. So I'm really curious kind of about that. So he's kind of, the way I see it is that probably he's the mushroom extracts that you buy if you buy supplements, I'm guessing. So we'll talk about that. It's really fun. He is like the man behind the thing that you see on the shelf. Welcome, Jeff.
Hi, Krista. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. So let's start top level. Let's help people understand why they care about mushrooms. First, mushrooms, if I was to say like last year at this time, I would have said, I feel like mushrooms are the emerging trend. But I mean, you're back here in the 70s doing crazy stuff. So let's talk about, overall, let's talk about mushrooms, how we want to classify them. I think about them being adaptogens, which are, help us deal with stress, and kind of like I kind of put them in that herbal category. But can you tell me how you view mushrooms and what you see as nutritional benefits? Like, what are some of the big things there?
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right about mushrooms being adaptogens. I mean, I consider mushrooms actually one of the premier adaptogens. In fact, the way I look at them is food as medicine. Mushrooms are just a fabulous food. There's something, the first thing I tell people when they're talking about, I want to supplement with mushrooms, I just say, start out by eating some mushroom. Mushrooms have a good level of protein, 20 to 40%. They are high in very good carbohydrates, mannitol being one of those, which is a very slow-acting sugar. And the other thing about the carbohydrate content of mushrooms is that it's primarily made up of beta-glucans. And beta-glucans, which we'll probably talk about more later, those make up 50% of the cell wall of a mushroom, and those are the compounds in a mushroom that give it its immunological activity. And that immunological activity, really, when you talk about adaptogens are something that are working in the background. Adaptogens give you homeostasis. They're something that you can think of as a harmony herb. So they're out there. They're counteracting stress. They're regulating some of our body processes. If we need a little bit more of, let's say, immune cells, it'll sort of give you more, but it won't kick in until you really need it. So this is one of the things about mushrooms. They are going to be there working in the background. You don't expect mushrooms to kick in and work overnight. That's not how they work. Mushrooms are something that you need to be taking for a period of time, and then they're there in the background helping you over, let's just say, you're feeling down, you're feeling kind of lack of energy, or you're stressed out in some ways. Those mushrooms are going to be there in the background helping you out. So that's how I look at mushrooms.
I love it. I love what you said about beta-glucans. That's going to be a really fun discussion. So let's talk about this is how I've seen mushrooms in the market so far, and I'd like to hear your opinions about this. So first I started taking a mushroom supplement for exercise performance. So I'm curious, and I don't remember, I gotta go. I should have pulled all my mushrooms out and looked at them. But I don't remember what that one is. But here's the ones where I really see a difference. So we have reishi, I think it's relaxing, chaga and lion's mane. Now, I could be getting this wrong. I'm pretty sure everything's mushroom. Chaga and lion's mane, I mean, those actually do work for me. Like, I feel like I'm ultra focused if I put some of that in some kind of beverage or tea or whatever, or just drink them plain. So I see reishi mushroom, or I'm seeing reishi, chaga, lion's mane. What are some other really common ones you feel are very mainstream in market, where maybe the listeners are saying, oh, I have seen that, or that's in a product I'm taking? Because this stuff is sneaking into products.
Yeah, it's funny because right now mushrooms are trending, and they're sort of like people are calling the next big superfood. Well, I started growing mushrooms commercially on a very big mushroom farm back in 1973. I worked on that farm for 10 years. I literally lived with mushrooms and knew this from that period. I mean, I knew the benefits of mushrooms from that far back. And I think the one, in terms, you spoke about 3 different mushrooms that are reishi, for example. I would call that adaptogen. The lion's mane now, that's what a lot of people are taking because of its nootropic benefits. So it actually stimulates nerve growth factor, which stimulates the growth of neurites. So those are the things that we need, and we need those to keep being produced. That to do with our cognition and memory. And who can't use something that'll help memory? Correct. I mean,
no
especially
doubt.
as we get old. So, and also it's shown some on dementia. Well, dementia is now a huge issue out there. The one that I think some of the others that you haven't mentioned, which people are familiar with, would be cordyceps.
Mm-hmm.
And cordyceps is a really, really cool fungus that historically has been wildcrafted up at the Tibetan plateau, and literally it's a caterpillar that overwinters in the earth. So it goes in, it hibernates, and while it's hibernating, the spores of cordyceps actually take it over and consume it completely. And then in the summer, pops this little blade-like fungus. So what they call cordyceps is caterpillar fungus, and people are out there on their hands and knees collecting these things. In the last 20 years, cordyceps has gone from, like in the early 90s, I could buy a kilo of cordyceps for $1,000. Now they get up to $20,000 for a dried kilo of cordyceps, which just outrageous. Of course, nobody can actually afford to buy it. And one of the interesting things about it is when I tried to introduce cordyceps, that caterpillar fungus, companies in the early 90s looked at me like customers do not want to eat insects. And also we have customers that are vegetarians. They don't want to eat cat meat. Okay, that's fine. But today, there's a really cool thing is in the last 10 years, and this is what I love about China. China is like the birthplace of mushroom cultivation. China right now produces 85% of the world's mushrooms. Now, the world is full of, thousands of species of mushrooms, but there's only about maybe a dozen or two that can actually be cultivated. Think about that. Of all of this huge kingdom of and there's only 24 of these that can be cultivated. Think of all the plants that we can grow. So just recently, scientists in China have figured out how to grow cordyceps, the actual little blade-like cordyceps, not the caterpillar, the blade-like. So now in our company, we have 100% cordyceps that we are selling, and at very, very reasonable price. And that to me is like, whenever a new mushroom comes in, Chris, whenever somebody learns how to grow a mushrooms, it's like a huge, huge deal. Because like I'm saying, only a few dozen mushrooms actually can be cultivated. So cordyceps is used primarily for, it was used for people who had neurasthenia traditionally, and that means you're just coming out of illness. You're weak, you're fatigued. That's when they prescribe cordyceps. Now cordyceps is being used by a lot of people who are athletic. They're maybe training some way. They're looking for something that'll help them out a little bit with their tiredness, their fatigue, and so on. So cordyceps has really penetrated the athletic market. So that's another one right now. The top 4 that out there really trending right now are Lion's mane is number one. Everybody wants lion's mane now. Reishi, cordyceps, and chaga.
So one thing I think you cut out just for a second is you were talking about how lion's mane is a nootropic and it stimulates nerve growth and...
Well, that's the primary thing that lion's mane is used for now, is actually stimulating what's called nerve growth factor. And nerve growth factor is a protein that actually is responsible for promoting the growth of neurites, and those neurites are what are being destroyed and created all the time by us. But as we get older, the new growth of neurites starts to slow down, and that's one of the causes that they figure for loss of memory and dementia and maybe even Alzheimer's. So the promotion of this nerve growth factor is very important, and if we have something that can actually do that, and people now, they're always looking for an edge, so this is why we've got this whole category now out there called nootropics, and so everybody wants something that will somehow enhance their performance, and so lion's mane is just like taken off, and everybody and his brother is looking for lion's mane.
Yeah, I've actually been looking for someone to talk about nootropics. Maybe you're the guy. But let's talk a little bit about cordyceps here. So my first question is, if cordyceps is so expensive, do you feel like the market for cordyceps could be adulterated? Right? We don't really regulate supplements and food, so it's easy for someone to say this is cordyceps, but it's not really cordyceps. Is that possible?
Well, here's the thing is that, I said that cordyceps was one of the most expensive herbs, and that was the wild-crafted cordyceps at $20,000 a kilogram. Well, the fact is now that we can cultivate cordyceps, the wild-crafted price and the wild-crafted cordyceps is like nobody could afford that. Now it's at a very reasonable price, under $100 a kilogram, dried kilogram. So if you go in, you can buy real cordyceps now, and that's what's really interesting. It's real. It's got no caterpillar on it at all, and the caterpillar fungus, the cordyceps, you would take that, you'd eat the caterpillar and the fungus. This is just the fungus, so it's quite reasonably priced now, so anybody can go out there and get cordyceps. But in terms of adulteration, look, man, don't get me started about adulteration. The supplement market has got so many fast buck artists out there. They're just trying to make money, and my category of mushrooms is full of products that are not really mushroom. Can you believe that? There's a lot of products that are being sold as mushrooms that are not really mushrooms, and a great example of that is, are you familiar with the food called tempeh?
I'm familiar with tempeh, yes, very much so.
Okay, well, tempeh is actually cooked soybeans with a fungus grown on it.
Because it's fermented soybean.
Yeah. So the fungus is growing on it. So when you buy it, it's the soybeans, and you look at it and it's all white. That white is mushroom mycelium. And just so your listeners understand this, a mushroom is a plant part. Just like if you've got ginseng or something, ginseng is sold and it's the root. So every plant has got multiple what we call plant parts, and each one of those parts has different benefits, because the root of ginseng is certainly different than the leaves and what it contains, and so that's why people are consume the root. Just like with a mushroom is one part of this fungal organism, and it has three parts. It has spores, it has what's called mycelium, and then it has a mushroom. And so when that spore first germinates, it germinates into a very fine filament, and when multiple of those fine filaments come together, they'll fuse together, they'll form a network, and that network is called mycelium, and that mycelium is what we never see. It's out there in the ground. It's decomposing everything. That's what it does. That's what fungi do. They decompose all the organic matter. So it's out there, and it's amassing nutrients. And when conditions are right, then like for us up here in the Pacific Northwest, when it comes fall, it gets cooler, it starts to rain, perfect conditions for a mushroom to come up. And so it produces a mushroom, and then that mushroom will mature and produce spores, and then we have basically closed this life cycle loop. So we have a spore, we have a mycelium, we have mushroom. What some companies are doing now is they're actually growing that mycelium in a laboratory on cooked grain, much like that tempeh is manufactured, and they sell it as a mushroom.
Yeah.
So if you go out to the marketplace and you're looking for a mushroom product, well, chances are you may very well end up with one of these myceliated grain tempeh-like products, and it doesn't have anywhere near the benefits of the mushroom. And the other part of that is that what you end up mostly getting is starch in these products. So man, the supplement market is like a minefield trying to figure out what's a good product. It's very, very difficult.
Well, we definitely need to cover that here in a minute, right? We need to cover out where the best places are to get mushrooms. I know when we talk general supplement education, really knowing integrity of company, feeling really good about that company integrity. What is their third-party testing for quality?
Yes.
And really going with brand.
Yes,
like once you know brands, you feel comfortable with that brand, right? So you can trust that brand typically.
That's right. That's absolutely. It's just like going to a physician or a naturopath or an herbalist. You talk to your friends. Okay, who is it out there that's a good one? You know what I mean?
Exactly. It's just like that. You're exactly right. I love that. So I have a question about, I work with people with food issues, but a lot of times other issues pop up, right? Bacterial overgrowths, fungal overgrowth. So let's dispel maybe a bit of a myth, potentially. It's thought that if people kind of present with fungal, quote unquote, fungal issues, let's just talk about it in layman's terms. The CDC estimates that 75% of women have a history of vaginal yeast infection at least one time in their life, meaning that they're experiencing fungal or candida type overgrowth. So let's talk about, some people would say, people with fungal or candida overgrowth should avoid mushrooms and yeast and other things like that. What do you have to say about that?
Well, you know what, that is a very interesting mythology. It's kind of like the doctrine of signatures, which is like produces like. I mean, do you really think that eating a certain food will necessarily produce that same food in your system? So in other words, and actually the thing is with mushrooms, and a mushroom is very different from yeast, and a mushroom is not going to necessarily feed that yeast any more than any other food will feed that yeast. In fact, mushrooms, medicinal mushrooms, are actually used to counteract candida. So really, to me, that's a myth. And if you go out there and if you search the internet and see if you can find any actual scientific paper that absolutely demonstrates that consuming mushrooms will produce or feed a yeast infection, you will not find it. And again, like I say, that's just somewhere this idea came up of like, oh yeah, if you eat mushrooms, that's because they are a fungus, and yeast is a fungus. If you eat mushrooms, then you're just going to contribute to your yeast infection. Two absolutely different fungi, and it's absolutely untrue that there's any correlation between eating mushrooms and contributing to your yeast infection.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to substantiate because you just said there's thousands of types of mushrooms, and in the same way, I don't know how many types of fungus there are, but they're not the same, right?
No, not at all. And yeast is very different. It's a single-celled organism, very different type of fungus than the mushroom. The mushroom's in its own family, and you've got other fungi out there that don't even produce what we would call a fruiting body, which is the mushroom. Don't even produce anything. All they are is just mycelium, and those types of fungi we call molds. So you'll see molds out there, and what's interesting is a lot of these molds have produced compounds that are very beneficial for us, like penicillin actually has come from a mold. That mold does not produce a mushroom. It's in a completely different category than what produces, or the whole mushroom family, totally different category. And again, it's producing a compound that is an antibiotic. It's very important for us.
Yeah. Medicine being based on herbs, kind of, or inspired by nature, was kind of the original source, right? So
yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's funny that you talk about, I want to talk a little bit more about uses of medicinal mushrooms and things before we go into kind of like geography and where you find mushrooms and whatnot.
Yep,
But
sure.
you were talking earlier about how China produces 85% of I think the world's mushrooms. And so
Yep.
I always think that China, I'm one curious about their weather and if that's part of it, and their size.
Well,
And go ahead.
No, well, so carry on. You can finish
Well,
that.
I was just thinking that China, they've done a lot of things right? It's kind of the birthplace of some pretty ancient medicine that kind of knew things first. So it's kind of...
and think about Chinese philosophy in general, Taoism, and those types of philosophies. I mean, they have been there for thousands of years. I mean, couple thousand years ago, they had a very high culture going on already. Whereas, people in Europe were, I mean, we had Rome and Greece and all of that. But man, the Chinese, they produced a culture that and art and all of this that was just fantastic. And look, here's the thing about China. And I first went over there in 1989. And one of the reasons I went over there was because I went over to a conference, a mushroom conference. China has got like literally hundreds of thousands of mushroom growers, small farmers. They've been doing this for a long time. They started growing shiitake mushrooms in the 12th century. Now they're the world's largest supplier of shiitake. And again, they produce 85% of the world's mushrooms. They have research institutes everywhere. They've got the farms. They've got factories, conferences. So I was over there just soaking it all up and also just learning more about how they use mushrooms, because when I first got into this business and started my company in 1989, I literally was walking around natural food expos and things like that, trying to convince companies to put mushrooms into their product line. But because nobody in 1989 had a mushroom product. Mm-hmm. None of they all had green herbs, because that's what we sort of know in the West. We know more about green herbs, so they all had green herbs. Nobody had a mushroom product. So I had to literally have articles written. I wrote articles, produced books, all sorts of information during the 90s just to educate people to the benefits of mushrooms. And it's just like, for example, in the United States, up until recently, we've only had maybe one mushroom in the marketplace. That's the button mushroom. Whereas in Asia, they're eating 12 to 15 different mushroom species over there, and they've had that in their diet for a long, long time. So we're just now starting to turn on to this whole idea of mushrooms as food and ultimately mushrooms as medicine. And let me tell you something that's really, I thought was really fun, is that I reading up on the history of mushroom growing and things like in the 17th century in England, they called mushrooms poor man's meat.
Yeah.
Poor man's meat. And sometimes mushrooms are big and very meaty. And you can imagine they're out there, they're growing wild. You can go out there and harvest these things and put them into your diet. And for people in the countryside out there, people looking for food stuff, 17th century, poor man's meat, a big, solid, meaty mushroom.
Yeah. Well, actually, that's not different than what we suggest now. It's kind of funny how history repeats itself, right? Because a lot of people will get a burger on a portobello mushroom. And so that's not substituting the meat, but they're replacing a portobello with a bun. Or a common recommendation is to make your meat go farther, put mushrooms in it, and no one will know the difference. And so apparently They knew that in the 17th century too. So.
Well, yeah. And that's interesting. You're totally into food. So you've been following this trend. It's like they're now, okay, they've actually done studies where they've chopped up mushrooms and they've blended it with ground beef at different concentrations up to at least 50%, and everybody who eats those says it's as good as the regular, if not better. And it makes sense. Whenever I'm eating ground beef, literally I'm going to chop up some onions, I'm going to chop up some mushrooms, I'm going to put it all together and barbecue it up. That's the way I would eat ground beef as a patty, and it's great. It's really good.
Yeah, actually, I'm curious. There's so many directions to go here, but I'm curious, since now we're talking about food-based options for mushrooms, I remember not liking, if you're listening to this episode and thinking, well, at least there's mushroom powder. I remember as a food-based thing, I didn't like mushrooms until college because someone prepared them right, which is really a story of every type of food, right? And if it's not prepared right, you don't always love it. And it was prepared, it was sad, right? So I had portobellas in sauteed in leftover scampi butter, and they're like candy. And I just kept doing that again. And then, it's just downhill from there. But so I'm curious, some of your favorite mushroom preparations, just how you like to eat.
Absolutely. Let me give you my number one in terms of, okay, if I just want to have mushrooms on their own as part of my meal, and this is so important. When you talk to people, oftentimes they say, "Oh God, mushrooms! It's like slimy, terrible." And I'm like, "Well, no, I don't know. Where are you getting this?" Well, I know where they're getting it, because the key with mushrooms is you have to cook them in a hot pan on a high heat. I cook mine in butter. That's my oil of choice, and so you get a nice hot pan. That butter nice and hot, you throw them in there. What happens is that when it's a hot pan, it will seal the moisture inside the mushroom. If you cook it on too low a heat, what happens is all the water comes right out of them. They're 90% water. They're a vegetable. I mean, not a true vegetable, but they're like a vegetable. So the water comes right out. Next thing you know, these mushrooms are sitting in water, and they just become a soggy mess. So high heat. What I like to do is for the other thing is, don't slice them too thin, maybe 1/8 of an inch or something like that. I like to brown them. So I like to sort of caramelize the outside of them. I'll even, at times in my pan, I'll flip them over by hand if I have to get the other side browned up. So I want to brown them up, high heat. I like to cook them a little bit longer. I like them to be sort of well cooked. And then at that point, I'll just sprinkle a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper. Oh man, it's delicious. I can hardly get them out of the pan because I'm eating them as I'm cooking them. They're really good. And this is I'm talking about the agaricus right now. And look, I was worked on an agaricus farm for 10 years. I lived with them, and I ate a lot of them then. I've never tired of them. I don't care what people say. Wild mushroom hunters are go, yeah, agaricus, it's bland, it's this, it's that. Yeah, I do not think so. I beg to differ. I think it's called the mushroom of Paris. I mean, that's where agaricus cultivation began in the 17th century over in France. And no, I think it's a great mushroom. You know that a portobello is the same as the button mushroom? These are the same mushrooms. The difference is the portobello has been able to mature, but the button mushroom is harvested immature.
Just like green and red peppers. Just like green and red peppers.
Yeah, so it's an immature mushroom, and why they do that is because it's got a much longer shelf life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you can grow it faster, probably. Obviously.
Well, I mean, you can get a lot of. It actually takes more time to do the portobello, but it's kind of like one of those ways that they can entice people into. Okay, here's another mushroom that you can taste, but. Back in the 70s, when I was on this mushroom farm, we had a Japanese scientist there, and he was doing experiments with shiitake, enoki, and oyster mushrooms. So I was exposed to that from a very early part-time in my career, and I was just like fascinated. So I was able to actually eat these mushrooms, which hardly anybody else in the whole country had access to because they weren't being sold in the markets. And in 1978, at our company there, we introduced fresh shiitake mushrooms into our local market in the Seattle area. 1978. That was the very first fresh shiitake mushrooms that were introduced in a major way in the United States. And here's what's interesting, is that the whole thing flopped because the feedback at that time was, oh, this shiitake mushroom, it's too strong. I'm like, too strong? It is wonderful. Shiitake mushroom. Are you familiar with shiitake mushrooms?
I was just thinking about how embarrassed I am that we don't even have, where I live, I don't have a lot of mushroom options, right? So I can get button and portobello in my local grocery store. And if I go a couple hours away, I can find a couple bins of shiitake or oyster.
God.
I
And
know.
I bet sometimes when you get there and see them, they look like hell because they
I know.
haven't
I wonder if I can
treated
order them
properly.
online. I'm pondering in my head. I'm like, could I grow some mushrooms under my front steps in the back in the dark where it's moist? I don't know. I was just pondering
Well,
this.
you know what? If you are in the right place, like I mean, out on the West Coast, we've got mushrooms everywhere in terms of in the markets, and we
Hmm.
can also get dried shiitake mushrooms. Which, if there's any mushroom dried that I would recommend, I would say dried shiitake. It's good. However, if you go in a normal supermarket and you look for the dried mushrooms that they have there, you might be paying $3 for maybe 15 grams. It's like outrageously expensive. Whereas I can buy in my markets here locally in British Columbia, I can buy a pound of dried shiitake for maybe 15 to $20.
Hmm.
A lot of dried shiitake, and dried shiitake, they're good. They are really good. But
Do you just put them in soups and sauces to rehydrate? Is that how you're preparing dried shiitake? Because
absolutely.
I'm thinking, I'm like, I'm gonna go find some now. I
Yes,
think I can
yes,
go
yes,
find
yes.
dried shiitake.
That's
Shiitake.
right. Or you can just, warm water, put them in there, let them rehydrate. Don't leave them for too long or else they'll get waterlogged. But
Hmm.
in there long enough to soften up. And the dried shiitake actually has a very strong flavor because when you dry mushrooms down, that flavor will be concentrated, so it'll be very flavorful. In China, they call shiitake shangu, which means fragrant mushroom.
Mm, that's beautiful. I love it. You're talking to all my foodie qualities. Like you're just making me excited about food right now. So let's get other people excited about. Some people are, really motivated by taste and some people are motivated by health. So let's talk about the health benefits of mushrooms a little deeper. You did mention
Sure.
some key things. You talked about lion's mane being nootropic. You talked about cordyceps becoming more of an endurance type thing, but we
Yeah.
didn't cover a lot. You touched on beta glucans, but I think you can go a little deeper, right, on some of the
Oh,
benefits
sure.
of
Yeah.
mushrooms.
Absolutely. Well, here's what's really interesting about mushrooms is when I first was in the mushroom growing business back in the 70s, classical Western nutritionists looked at mushrooms and they said, this is actually a non-food, everybody. It's got a great flavor, but the fact is there's nothing to this. There's no real nutritional benefits. Wrong. What they were talking about at the time, believe it or not, mushrooms are low in calories. And to a classical nutritionist in the 70s, if a food did not have any calories, if it was low calorie, it was a non-food. Food has got
Mhm.
to have energy in it. It's got to have a lot of calories. And it's like, no, and now, I mean, here we are now in an age where low cal is a good thing. Back then, it was like, okay, this mushroom, it's just like a great garnish, but it's certainly not a food. So mushrooms have a great amino acid profile. They've got B vitamins, B1, B2, and B3, niacin, riboflavin, and thiamine. They've got very high amounts of potassium and phosphorus, which is really good. Um, they they also, getting back to the beta glucans in their cell walls, they have beta glucans, and all mushrooms have beta glucans in their cell walls. That's an important component on that. So you can say to some degree that all mushrooms are beneficial and have some immunological activity. One of the things about the mushroom cell walls and the mushrooms in general, they're also very, very high in fiber. So that's where they have these resistant carbohydrates, and that fiber is going down and feeding our microbiome. So the fact of the fiber in mushrooms is also a very positive thing. But the beta glucans in certain mushrooms, and this is the key to why some mushrooms are medicinal and some are not, is the architecture of the beta glucan changes from mushroom to mushroom. Changes just a little bit. It's just kind of like the way it's put together is just each one is just a little bit different from the other. And that's the thing too that I want to be clear about is that we can't put all mushrooms into the same profile nutritionally.
Right.
We can't do that. They're different. Just as an example, shiitake's got 20% protein. Agaricus, the button mushroom, has 35% protein. So the actual nutrition of each mushroom is a little different, although in a general sense, I consider them to be all very beneficial. But getting back to the beta glucans is that, okay, we've got certain mushrooms that are high in beta glucans. Guess what? Those end up being the mushrooms that traditional Chinese medicine is telling us are the medicinal ones. And it's like, wow, okay, these medicinal mushrooms all share one thing in common, and that is this high level of these active beta glucans. So one of the things that my company does is we test all our products. We test them. We don't just test them for the standard stuff that you need to know, like heavy metals or pesticides or microorganisms before we sell them. We've got to pass all those tests, which we do, but we also test them for the beta glucans. And so we've got data going back 3 years now. We test every single lot that we make when we make up our products, and so we've got beta glucan information where we can say, okay, this is what this particular mushroom should show beta glucan wise. Shiitake has 30% beta glucan. Reishi, interestingly enough, has got 50% beta glucan, and that's the other thing that I thought was so interesting is, as we started doing these tests, and after we built up a body of data that tested maybe 20 different reishi products that we had, or 20 different shiitake products, we could say, okay, this is what we expect to see. This is the mean of all that. Reishi, here it is. The reishi being what I consider the premier medicinal mushroom. It was one of the very highest in beta glucans, and I thought, well, there you go. That makes sense. But we're lucky because some of these really choice edible mushrooms are also high in beta glucans. Shiitake, maitake. Another one would be lion's mane. Lion's mane, actually, boy, if you ever get a chance to pick up some fresh lion's mane, grab it right now. Mm-hmm. It is really delicious. It's got a really sweet flavor. The other one right now that out there, which I highly recommend to anybody into food mushrooms, they call it the king trumpet. And it's a type of oyster mushroom. It is delicious, really good. And it also has medicinal benefits. Before I leave this one part, let me just tell you, one of the best mushrooms I've ever eaten is a mushroom called termitomyces. And termitomyces refers to the fact that this mushroom is cultivated by termites.
Ooh, weird.
Yeah. So where they get it is if you find these termite mounds, and down inside the mound, the termites are actually growing this mycelium down there.
Well, if you want some really healthy termites, they have to have their food. I feel like I'm on an episode of Planet Earth right now, imagining the termite mounds. I literally was just watching.
Well, yeah, and so these mushrooms come shooting out with a super long stem. It could be 12 to 20 inches long with this cap on it, shooting out of these termite mounds, and the mushroom is absolutely delicious.
That is an interesting image in my head, Jeff. Thanks for planting that up. I have dreams about termite mound mushrooms tonight. When I think about beta glucans, I really think about blood sugar benefits and heart health benefits and microbiome benefits. So what I heard you, basically the translation of what you just said there was like, if you want the best benefits of beta glucans, do some reishi because it's the highest amount, basically.
Yes, and then the other side of that, of course, is that you can also be eating mushrooms, meaning shiitake or maitake or lion's mane, because they're all 30 to 40% beta glucan. So you can also be eating mushrooms, getting them into your diet as a wonderful food, plus getting the benefits as a beta glucan. Now, I know what we do we don't sell mushrooms per se. What we do is we take our mushrooms and we will dry them. We will then turn them into a powdered extract. So we don't sell just a dried mushroom or a fresh mushroom or anything like that. We sell bulk powders because we're a raw material supplier to the supplement industry. And of course, the supplement industry, what do they want? They want to put something in a capsule.
Mm-hmm.
These days, what's really cool and I really love is products that come in pouches. I don't know if you've turned onto that too much, but I love the idea of pouches. Now all of a sudden we've got something that's lightweight. You're not shipping a lot of weight around. It's a
Yeah.
cool way to store food and on the shelf or shipping or whatever. And it's so much less energy to produce a pouch than it is a glass jar and a metal lid and all the rest. I think about all of that, and I just think pouch.
Yeah, packets. Yeah, I definitely have my mushrooms in packets. And that is one thing I want to talk to you about as we talk about sourcing of mushrooms. But that is kind of the big question as just a real life, everyday person. If I want the health benefits of mushrooms, how much do I know? Like, what's a good dose of any of these beneficial mushrooms, cordyceps or chaga or lion's mane? How much? Is it a teaspoon? Does it not matter because of, like herbs, it's energetics, and so just some is good? Like, tell me what you think should be, how much should you take to see a benefit over how long of time?
Well, if you're supplementing, then I would say you're probably needing to take 1 to 2 dried grams. And the key here is what it is that you're actually taking. And I told you earlier about these products out there that were tempeh, like myceliated grain. And the problem with growing the mycelium like they're doing is that they don't separate the grain out at the end of the product. So the product ends up being mostly grain. And you're not buying that product because you're looking for grains. You're buying it because you want mushroom tissue, and there's very little mushroom tissue in those products, and they're not mushroom. It's the mycelial stage. So what you have to look for is you have to look at the label really closely, because even those particular products, if you look at the front label, it will say reishi mushroom, and it'll have a great picture of a reishi mushroom. It might even say made with 100% reishi mushrooms. That is how these products are sold. And then if you're lucky, not all companies will do this, but if you're lucky, when you turn it over, it will say in the supplements facts, it will say mycelium. Then you go, oh, okay, this is not actually mushroom, it's mycelium. And then you look down in the other ingredients, and maybe if you're lucky, it will say myceliated rice or myceliated oats. Look for that, because if you see that, you know right away that you're getting this grain-based mycelium and you're not actually getting mushroom. And there's a reason for it, Krista, and this is the worst part about it. There's a reason for it, is that growing mushrooms is actually expensive. Mm-hmm. It's very expensive to grow mushrooms. And can you imagine? Mushrooms are still harvested by hand. We don't have mechanical pickers for mushrooms. So if you ever go to a mushroom farm, like on the mushroom farm that I worked, it's a huge warehouse. It's the agaricus mushroom actually doesn't need any light. So it's actually dark in the agaricus houses. Most mushrooms need light to grow. The button mushroom does not. So we all were walking around with miner's lamps.
Yeah, it's a little depressing.
So there it is on this farm. But basically, it's expensive to grow mushrooms, and because I'm a mushroom grower by trade, and I know the economics of it, I realized in the 90s that I cannot grow mushrooms and sell them as a supplement, because the minute you dry out a mushroom, now you have to get 10 times more for it, because a mushroom's 90% water, like most vegetables. So if you're getting $5 a pound for fresh shiitake, you dry those out. Now you have to get $50 a pound for that same pound of shiitake. The economics don't work. So if that product says made in the USA, well, I hate to say this, but it's not mushroom. It's actually this myceliated grain product. And the issue is, those products are very, very low in beta-glucan. The beta-glucan level's down around maybe 5%, and then the starch level is as high as 60%, which is just the opposite of a mushroom. A mushroom is 30 to 60% beta-glucan and less than 5% of starch. In fact, a mushroom doesn't really contain starch. This is something that's really cool too, is that you've probably heard the people talk about mushrooms, and they go, yeah, mushrooms are much more like humans than a mushroom is like a plant. Well, the reason is that mushrooms breathe like we do. They breathe in
oxygen and give off carbon dioxide. So do we. And mushrooms actually have a storage carbohydrate called glycogen, like we do. Our storage carbohydrate is glycogen. Plants have a storage carbohydrate of starch. Mushrooms do not have starch. So we can measure that. And this is what happens is when we do the analysis of all of these different other products that are myceliated grain, it's mostly grain because the starch level is really, really high. When you go to buy a mushroom product, what are you looking for? Well, you're looking for an actual mushroom product. Mm-hmm. You're not looking for starch. You're not looking for this tempeh-like product. That's not what you're after, and it doesn't have the benefits that you're looking for. So when you go out into the market or if you're on the internet looking for products, be very clear about what you're looking for and look for these little tells when it says mycelium on there or if it says anything about grains. That's what you'll be buying. You'll be buying a lot of starch, and ultimately that's kind of a waste of money.
Yeah, it would be a lot of transparency from that brand if they mention that, because it reminds me of, I think we have more than just mushroom products that are done this way, right? We have vitamin K2, for example, is made with bacteria, and so therefore sometimes it's grown on different types of beans, and so it's commonly grown on soybeans, and so for some people that doesn't work. I had someone really sensitive to garbanzo beans once, and she reacted to a K2 grown on a garbanzo bean, but unless you knew the background of that, you wouldn't know. So kind of along those same lines, it's just
absolutely. I mean, I every year I go to a conference called Paleo FX. A lot of people out there that are paleo and they don't eat grains, and there's a lot of people that are sensitive to grains. And when they come by and say, "Oh, mushrooms, I love mushrooms, and I'm taking this great mushroom product," and I just say, "Well, okay, tell me the brand." And they tell me the brand, and I say, "Well, I hate to say this, but that brand that you're taking is actually mostly grain," and they're just like, "Oh my God." You know, I mean, it's like these are people who don't eat grains, and they're shocked, absolutely shocked. And like you say, I mean, the issue is truth in labeling. I mean, don't put it out there and say it's a mushroom when it's not a mushroom. It's not a mushroom. You know, this gets back to the whole idea of plant part, and also if you're actually growing this mycelium and you're growing it on grain and you're not separating the grain out from the end of the process, well, tell us, let us know, let us make that choice. Don't put it out there and call it a mushroom and try to hide that. I mean, can you imagine, here's something that I find just amazing is some of these companies, they're selling these powders to food companies. And you know what they say? They say, you know what, our mushroom products are very bland and they'll go with anything. In fact, they'll say they don't even taste like a mushroom.
Yeah.
and I'm like, well, is that a
Here's
red
your sign.
Yeah, I mean, Krista, is that a red flag for like somebody selling a mushroom product? It doesn't even taste like mushroom. Why is that? I mean, wouldn't you ask, well, why doesn't it taste like a mushroom if it's a mushroom product?
Mm-hmm. So I do want to talk to you about kind of the growth and that whole thing. So basically you had said, if you see mycelium on the label or myceliized rice or whatnot, that says a red flag. And so you're maybe going to see this if they're U.S. grown. So you're growing, you have a Chinese mushroom farm basically, right? So let's talk about how that started. Why did you go to China to start a mushroom farm? And then the second part is, we hear about pollution in China and things that grow there. So how do you view that as an issue, if at all?
Well, certainly. And you know what? I agree that, boy, you have to be careful. And with all products and Chinese products, I mean, there's certainly a lot of negative news out about different Chinese products. And let me just say a couple of things is we have to do the same in the United States. I mean, the amount of pesticides and chemicals put on our food in the United States is enormous. It's like also, I say to people, yeah, would you eat anything that's grown down on the Gulf Coast of the United States, down there in that whole area where they're processing all sorts of chemicals and stuff? Well, of course not. It's the same with anything grown in China. I mean, there are areas, industrialized areas, that are quite polluted.
and they've got factories and things like that, and the factories, the smoke and stuff from those factories leach out in the water and the air and gets hurled around. We grow our mushrooms, and it's not just one farm. We deal with multiple growers. In 1997, and again, I traveled all throughout China in the 90s, and I visited farms and institutes from north to south, east to west in China. And I ultimately discovered and some people that I started to work with over there. I've been working with my Chinese partners now for over 20 years. And we, in 1997, I went to China with OCIA, which is one of the top organic certifiers in the United States. I took OCIA to China with me. We had the very first organic certification workshop for mushrooms in China, 1997. I'm a total believer in organic certification, a total believer. My company's been certified since 1992. So in 1997, we organized this workshop over there. It's really interesting, we had 24 mushroom growers come to this workshop. Today, there are tons and tons of organically certified mushrooms coming out of China, and not from Chinese certifiers or anything, top-level German certifiers. Before any of our products leave China, we test them for pesticides, heavy metals, everything. Before they even leave, when they get back over here, we test them again. But again, for me, I realized that was the only place that I was going to be able to grow mushrooms at a cost that would allow mushrooms to be sold as supplements. And for that reason, there are no supplements in the United States right now, no mushroom supplements where the actual mushroom comes from a grower in the United States, unless it's a very small little business that's wild crafting and sells a little bit here, a little bit there, but no major companies, nothing like that. It's just simply not economical. I mean, it would be great if it was, but it is not. So we grow our mushrooms way back in the mountains, back where we're growing the mushrooms. You look around and it's just forests everywhere, and in some cases some rice fields, but way back in the mountains. I just got back from China, a trip to China in early September. We visited reishi farms. Oh my God, it is one of the most beautiful sights you've ever seen. It's all grown outside in shade houses, and the reishi mushrooms actually grow on wood that is put into the ground, covered with earth, and so the reishi mushroom comes up. Yeah, the reishi mushroom comes up out of the ground, and in these houses, and I'll send you some photos because it's amazing. In these houses, and you'll see it's nothing but a sea of reishi mushrooms, and they're literally cap to cap. It's like wall to wall mushrooms. It is just an amazing sight. And we're over there in September because reishi loves hot temperatures. Oh, was it hot? Oh my God. It was like in some of these houses, it was like 85 degrees. And although it's under shade cloth, it is hot and humid. But we were there early because that's when they harvest these, is in September. A lot of the other mushrooms like cold temperatures. So when we go over in November, where it cools off. China's a huge, huge country. So they'll grow mushrooms all throughout the country, all different locations. But again, with these farms, most of them are grown back up away from all of these industrialized areas. The water is clean. And look, it's interesting because in China, I've been up, we've toured up to a mountain, and the top of the mountain, and you walk down, and then it's cool. They have steps that go all the way down this creek that starts up there, and all these beautiful pools and waterfalls. The water is absolutely clear and clean, but as it continues down and hits the first village, and they start to put their wash water into it, and then it keeps on going. By the time it gets to the ocean, it is a toxic soup. And look, if you want to see the same thing, go to Europe and go up to Switzerland and look at the water, the rivers that start in Switzerland. They are pristine. By the time they get to Holland, it is ugly, brown, toxic soup. So, this is not just a Chinese phenomena. This is something that we all have to deal with everywhere. And that's why I'm so supportive of organic agriculture. And I urge your listeners to buy organic. We have to support organic growers. That's the only way we're going to slowly bring back food that's not chemical laden.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I grew up on the northern tip of the Missouri River, so it's not any different in the United States either, as far as
you know exactly.
Is.
I mean,
Yeah.
It's like, can you imagine swimming in the Mississippi as it comes out around New Orleans?
When I lived in St. Louis, they would say, "You go swimming in that river." I'm like, it's totally different when you're on the northern tip of it. So,
well, yes, exactly. I mean, it's like no different anywhere in the world, and it's really unfortunate. And I just feel so sorry first of all, for the earth itself, what we've done to it, but then for people that have to live nearby that. And Krista, the thing that is so disturbing is that when generations grow up and that's all they know, and they do not know a time when there is pristine clear water or clear skies, that becomes the norm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Jeff, you were really describing this quite in a picturesque way, and I got to thinking maybe we should take a food tour to China, and you can show us around to some mushroom farms. I feel like that's your next calling, just the way you describe it. You're truly you're very passionate. You like to educate. I think it's a great fit for you. It's just a little side thing. It's tax deductible travel. Works. I mean, not that it isn't already, but anyway, just an idea. I think we should go on a trip to China.
I will keep you posted because I have customers that are asking me the same thing, and we're actually going to plan on that at some point. The logistics of it is always difficult because everybody's got a different schedule, but we would give people a lot of time to think about it and plan ahead. But yeah, that's something that's kind of on our radar because many of our customers would love to go over there and visit the mushroom farms, and it is quite spectacular. I'll send you some photos, Krista.
Absolutely. Yeah, you need a small group too. So, the big question is, solve the problem for us. Where should we go buy our mushroom supplements? Because you're the guy you're the wizard behind the curtain. You know where to buy them. What can you tell us about where we can go get mushrooms?
Well, first, let me just to say, if your listeners would go to Namex.com, that's our website, NAMMEX. I've got a lot of great information there, so people can go to my website and they can be further educated by all the information I've got. So I highly recommend coming to our website. Namex is a business to business. We're a wholesaler. We sell to other businesses. That's what we do. We do have a retail outlet where we sell the products on the internet. And the reason we do that is a lot of our customers like to take our products and blend them, and we're always getting calls from consumers saying, "Oh, gee, where can I get your products?" And so we just kind of decided, okay, we'll put out our products, standalone mushroom powders. They're not blended with anything else, and we sell them on the internet at a site called Real Mushrooms, REAL, realmushrooms.com, and that's where you can find our products at the retail level. And and then we've got a lot of customers out there that all I can say, a lot of them are like, it's funny because we've got big companies, we've got small companies. These days we sell to companies that put our products in chocolates. They put them in teas and coffees. It's like people now are getting so innovative with mushrooms and foods in general. I mean, my goodness, you would know that. I mean, the food thing has just been, it's just so interesting to see all the different food and beverages out there now. And even this idea of people moving away from soda pop, going to beverages that are actually beneficial and can give us something positive. It's just like, I just think, your generation, I'm just so happy to see people of your generation who are as deeply committed to real food, to clean food, to good eating, healthy lifestyle. That to me is just so gratifying.
And I thank you for pioneering that, really, because you were plowing some pretty tough sod there in the 70s, especially, right? Trying to get the word out. And here's the fruits of your labors so many decades later, really. It's actually pretty incredible. I think the mushrooms are keeping you looking very young. So that's an excellent thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just thinking, so realmushrooms.com, I'll be visiting there. Finally, before we go, I hope I'm not forgetting anything. Oh, I was going to say, I see these mushrooms popping up a lot. I actually use them. I use some herbal compounds that have mushrooms built in as some like adrenal support and things. So yeah, you kind of see them a little bit everywhere.
Yeah. And you should also, you should send me maybe the brands that you're using, and I can, just give them a quick once over and go, oh, okay, yeah, good, not good. Or,
yeah. It's fun for you too. I know it is. I can tell. Yeah, excellent. So Jeff, if you had to leave our listeners with, a closing thought on like, if this is really something that's blowing their mind and they're like, okay, where do I start? What would you tell them?
Well, the first thing I tell people is put mushrooms into your diet. So go out into your market, buy some mushrooms, start out, with small amounts and cook them properly. See how well you like their taste. I mean, the cool thing about mushrooms is you can put them into anything, put them into stir fries. I eat mushrooms with my meat. So if I'm cooking up a steak or something, I can't eat it without mushrooms along with it. And so you can, eggs. I mean, you can put mushrooms into so many different things. They go with so many different other recipes. So put mushrooms into your diet. If you're fortunate enough to be in a larger city or an area where you've got some small growers, go to the farmer's market or something like that. Try out some of the other ones. Try shiitake. If you can find shiitake, definitely buy some shiitakes and cook those up. Oyster mushroom is good, and that king trumpet if you can find it. Lion's mane if you're lucky. On the West Coast we have so many mushroom growers, small mushroom growers that are putting these into the markets that it's not hard to find them. I know out in the Midwest it's quite kind of different in terms of that. And it was interesting that you just recently used a metaphor of plowing the sod or something. I thought, oh yeah, I wonder if Krista was a farm girl.
Well, everything around me is a farm, so yeah.
Yeah, you said you're from the Dakotas, and I thought, well, yeah, okay, yeah, that's definitely farm country for sure.
Yeah, and you're definitely in mushroom company. I look at photos from someone I know who's in Port Angeles, which isn't very far from you, I think. And
that's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah, and it looks like a fairy tale when she's out mushroom hunting. I'm like, oh my gosh, I think I just need to go visit there. It's just
if
kind of
you get a
bucket
chance,
list.
Krista, go out and visit her, because that Olympic National Park, which is she's right on the edge of there, is one of the most beautiful spots in the world. And what's interesting is in the 1890s in Seattle, they still hadn't figured out, and people still hadn't gone all the way through there. They actually thought that they might find Shangri-La in there.
That
and you know what? For me, it is Shangri-La. If you go back in there and go during the summertime, they've got trails all the way through back there. They're beautiful valleys, rivers, lakes. It's a fantastically beautiful area, beautiful forests. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds great. Well, I feel like I went on a trip today with you, Jeff. You really helped my wanderlust, today, and you really spoke to my foodie senses. So I had such a good time talking mushrooms here. It's even hard to summarize. We talked about, basically mushrooms, they're growing, how to pick them out, beware of mycelium. We talked about adaptogens, or use them as, they're really food. It's really food as medicine. And that is speaking my language. When I work with people, I type in, food as medicine program, right? To just kind of set
cool.
the stage. So I like how you mentioned that right off the bat. Like,
yeah.
Okay, yep, totally. This is up-leveling stuff, right? This is how you continue to improve your life by looking for beneficial kind of superfoods, but also like these are just things we've always had that we're taking notice of now. So
Yeah, and I appreciate you very much in having me on today. It was great to talk to you. And I looked at your Facebook page this morning and I went, wow, you are really doing a lot of cool stuff. So it's really wonderful to meet people like you out there, especially your generation. I mean, you're kind of the same generation as my sons, and it's just like I look at them and they're so much into health and exercise and diet and food, and I'm just like, it's just very, very gratifying. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you again for everything you do. It's been a blast.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Krista.
One of the best gifts you could give us at the Less Stress Life is your feedback. We are paid in podcast reviews. If you enjoyed this or any other episode, please leave us a review. In the iTunes store or from your podcast app, just search for Less Stress Life as if you're not already subscribed. Click on the banana face image, scroll to the bottom where it shows the text of other reviews, and write a review. While you're there, hey, make sure you hit subscribe. For Android or Stitcher users, you gotta go to the desktop site and search for Less Stress Life, and then scroll down to leave a review. Stitcher doesn't load Apple reviews on their site, so if you want, you can leave a review in both places. Your feedback means a lot to the success of the show. Thanks so much for taking the time to do that. You rock.